Good evening. My name is Cathy Leff, and on behalf of the Wolfsonian, Florida International University, and our partners, WLRN and the Miami Herald Media Company, I want to welcome you to Power of Design Complaints, our inaugural Ideas Festival. The Wolfsonian has a collection of objects, but at its core, it's a museum of ideas. And Power of Design was a rapid prototyped 4-day multidisciplinary festival. Is intended to spark conversations around the ideas and agendas embedded in our historical collection and the collection's relevance to the issues, events, and culture of our times and our community. I'd like to take a brief moment just to discuss a little bit for some of you, since you haven't been here, both this year's theme and the Wolfsonian's collection. First, the theme is complaints, but we didn't intend this as a gripe fest, but more a solution fest, and complaint is a starting point for problem solving. We're focusing on how complaints can lead to action, innovation, and even solutions. In other words, where does complaints get us? We hope that tonight we kick off a rich conversation around the theme that continues throughout the weekend and even beyond. The starting point is the museum's collection, and so you're in for a treat with the talent of people who work directly in it and are now guest curators, and you'll meet them shortly. So the starting point tonight is the museum's collection, with presentations on several objects in the collection as a way to set the groundwork for the festival, as we explore ways in which the diverse objects express or reflect complaints or may point toward solutions. The approach, of course, is just one of many ways to consider the museum's collection, but it's one that offers us an insight into many ways, from considering issues such as complaints, responses, and problem solving and design, to industry, politics, and many of the same subjects that we'll explore tomorrow and the day after. So by the end of this festival, we hope that some of the topics we've considered are as diverse as innovative approaches to dealing with grievances around cities and city life, the air travel experience, humor as a way of framing and even responding to political complaints. And we really want to hopefully inspire provocative conversation about whether the digital age is making our lives better or worse. In a way, it's sort of a journey from history to today and the preoccupations of our times. We're so grateful to the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, especially its president, Alberto Ibargüen, who unfortunately isn't here tonight, but he's well represented by colleagues, and his wife, Susanna Ibargüen. I would like to call attention to her. Vice Presidents Carol Coletta and Dennis Scholl, and Miami Program Officer Matt Haggman for inspiring us to create this Ideas Festival and then providing the lead sponsorship. We also thank Ed Joyce and Northern Trust Bank, David Martin and Terra Group, the Fontainebleau Hotel for their generous sponsorship. And I want to thank an unnamed admirer of both the Wolfsonian and Intelligence Squared from London, and our friends Sarah and Hannah, who you'll meet tomorrow night, who generously sponsored tomorrow's Prophets of the Digital Age and made it possible for us to offer it for free. The entire Wolfsonian team has played an amazing role in this entire effort, and I'm grateful to each of our colleagues. I fear you would definitely complain if I name them all, so I hope you'll take time to read the program, and they're all listed and acknowledged there, or visit the website, powerofdesign.wolfsonian.org, as all the participants, partners, sponsors, collaborators are mentioned and acknowledged. The website was intended to be more than a billboard for the event, but a rich content for the overall program. I do, however, want to single out just a few people who were so critical to making this happen and without whom it would have been possible. First, Sean Clybourne. Sean, where are you?
Hello.
Back there. Sean is a cultural historian of East Central Europe and a former Fulbright Hays Scholar. And last year he was a Wolfsonian Fellow, and when we were brainstorming the idea of what would be a big theme that would make this collection relatable to our own times, he suggested complaints. Andrea Gollin was the content. Andrea, where are you? Right there. Andrea, very modest, was the content mastermind behind the website and all the the editor of all our materials. Writer Eric, Jules, and Paul, are you guys here? Well, they will be here, I'm sure. Represent OK Focus, one of the coolest advertising or creative agencies on the planet, and they were responsible for our branding and web design. Todd Oldham and Steve Heller, whom you'll meet shortly on stage, were curators respectively of the fifth floor installation Bummer and the poster exhibition Complaints: An Inalienable Right, which is in the lobby. And it was really fantastic to have them not only participate in these exhibits, but to offer their wise counsel throughout the entire planning process. Julie Chase, where's Julie? Well, anyway, Julie is probably out there helping with other logistics, but Julie so brilliantly executed every aspect of the more than 20 events that comprise this festival, along with the assistance of Fatima Janji. And Fatima's somewhere. There's Fatima's in the back. Thank you so much, Fatima. I'm also thankful to Michael Kreitzer, who's a Wolfsonian board member, a chairman emeritus, and the present chair of the Friends of WLRN, who forged the relationship between the Wolfsonian and the radio station. And I want to thank the entire WLR team. Victor Kendall's here, John Labonia, Alicia Zuckerman, Kenny Malone, Adrian Kennedy. I hope I didn't miss anybody, but they've been really wonderful partners, and Kenny Malone will be operating an audio complaints booth throughout the weekend, and we really want to hear what's on your mind, whether it's relating to your experience here or anything else. I'm also so grateful to Jane Woldridge and the Miami Herald for their collaboration and administration of the Solve This Miami competition. And we look forward tomorrow night to announcing the winner of this $25,000 grant. Kurt Andersen, whom you will meet shortly, was the complaints ombudsman, the ringmaster, and he will be introduced right as soon as I'm finished by Matt Haggman of the Knight Foundation. But most importantly, I want to thank each of you for spending your time with us this weekend, for committing to think about the crucial role that design plays in giving voice to grievance and solving problems, which is evidenced in our collection and in our programming throughout the weekend. I hope this inspires continued conversation around these issues and provide you with the opportunity to engage with and exchange with some of the most innovative thinkers and problem solvers of today. So thank you for coming to the festival, and look forward to spending our time together. And now I'd like to ask Matt Haggman to come up and introduce Kurt.
Thank you very much, Cathy. On behalf of the Knight Foundation, it is such a pleasure to be here. You know, Cathy, this is particularly exciting because I think back to when you and Carol and I were sitting in our conference room, sort of sketching this idea out, right? And talking as you were talking about what you wanted to do, and here we are. So it's absolutely thrilling and such an exciting moment. You know, at Knight Foundation, our mission is promoting informed and engaged communities. We support transformational ideas that promote quality journalism, advance media innovation, foster the arts, and engage communities, and such as our initiative here in Miami to support and propel the city's emerging community of entrepreneurs and startups and makers. With each of these efforts, gatherings like this are critically important, where we challenge assumptions, try to think and do in new ways, and push convention aside, all the while aiming to inspire and connect. To lead us in our journey this weekend, it is my pleasure to introduce our Master of Ceremonies. Kurt Andersen is the author of best-selling novels True Believers, Heyday, and Turn of the Century, and of the critically acclaimed nonfiction books Reset and The Real Thing. He is host and creator of Studio 360, the Peabody Award-winning public radio program about culture. He's a regular contributor to Vanity Fair and the New York Times, and he writes for television, film, and the stage. He is a graduate of Harvard College and received his honorary doctorate from the Rhode Island School of Design. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kurt Andersen.
Thank you. It is. I have wanted to come to this museum ever since it was founded, and now I finally get to come. And this is such a great pleasure in every way to be here for this fantastic conference. There was a one-woman show on Broadway more than a decade ago. You may or may not have seen it. Traveled around the country. It was Lily Tomlin. It was called The Search for Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe, in which the most memorable line in that show was, "I personally believe we develop language because of our deep inner need to complain." I don't know about that, but thinking about our theme and this cohering idea, I realized that this country began as a complaint. As a spectacular complaint. I am talking about the Declaration of Independence. Of course, the best known line from our Declaration is the nice positive part. It's all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But the rest of the thing, it is nothing but complaint. Seriously, it is a catalog of, quote, Thomas Jefferson's words, the long train of abuses and usurpations by the present King of Great Britain. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states by obstructing the laws for the naturalization of foreigners. That sounds familiar. He has sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people, cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, imposing taxes on us without our consent, depriving us of trial by jury. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. This is before the revolution began, remember. I could go on. Really, this is about a quarter of the complaints enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, our founding document. I realized, reading it closely and thinking about it, that we essentially whined our way to independence as Americans. So here's the thing. Complaint is provoked by all kinds of things short of high-handed, arrogant monarchs 3,000 miles away. Because nothing that is vibrant and complicated and interesting, no life, no company, no organization, no neighborhood, city, system is perfect. So even if we think we live in the best of all possible worlds, we still point out the imperfections because it can always get better. And sometimes complaining makes things better. Sometimes it does. So in other words, to be an engaged human being means to sometimes complain. Also, preparing for this weekend, I discovered that in social psychology, of course, there is an entire sub-discipline devoted to studying complaint. There's a research paper of the several I read, published in 2008, that defines a complaint. Allow me to quote, "Therefore, the speech act of complaint can be defined as an illocutionary act in which the speaker, the complainer, expresses his/her negative opinions/feelings towards the things described in the proposition, the complainable, and for which he/she holds the hearer, the complainee, responsible, either directly or indirectly." On the one hand, reading that paper made me realize why I complain about academic writing almost whenever I come across it. But truly, it was an interesting paper because it's called, as it happens, a cross-cultural pragmatic study of complaints in American English and Ukrainian. This is the work I've done for this conference. I'm telling you, I did my homework. For the author of this work, who is a Polish professor, did set up an experiment where they had individuals deliberately arrive late to an appointment with friends, Ukrainians in Ukraine and Americans in the United States, to see how the stood-up friend would react to that. She found out that Americans are much less likely to complain at all, and when they do, they complain overwhelmingly by hinting at their unhappiness or showing what she says is indirect disapproval. Whereas something like 40% of Ukrainians do what Americans never do in this study, which is they go beyond hinting and indirection. They use jokes, they use irony to complain, or they just say, "You were late!" They simply assert the crime, or they express open disapproval or actually demand satisfaction. And I don't know what that meant in the case of Ukraine, but that's what the study said. So if this study can be extrapolated, Americans are not by nature full-on complainers, at least not with their friends, or at least not compared to Ukrainians, which helps explain maybe what just happened in Kiev. Complaints about corruption and diminishing liberty got louder and louder. They attempted to be crushed. They got louder and louder still, and ultimately the government was brought down, which is even more interesting because in the same study, they referred to this ranking of 29 European countries ranked according to the citizens' expectation of unequally distributed power. How much you expect? Yeah, of course, I'm going to get screwed. Ukraine is number one of the 29 countries in Europe. But they are also, as this study showed, quick to complain about it, which is an interesting and I think, enlightening combination. By the way, the second highest ranked country in that same study were Russians. So there you go. Maybe it explains what's happened the last 2 weeks. The famous behavioral economist Dan Ariely says there are several different ways that his discipline has found reasons that people complain. One, for instance, is that we look to bond with others, that complaining is not really meant to complain except to find somebody else with whom we can talk trash about the same thing and become their better friend as a result. And I've certainly experienced that. Some of my best friends became my friends by finding that we hated the same people or things. And another reason he says that people complain is social psychology believes is because we want reassurance. We want people to say in response, "Oh no, it'll be okay." And by the way, that's life. That's really not the kind of complaining we're about this weekend. And since the weekend's themes are design as well as complaint, let me share with you just a hobby horse of mine. It's not exactly a complaint, although when I wrote a piece about it in Vanity Fair last year, many unhappy readers took it as a complaint. It is that design and our visual culture generally have been at this unprecedented standstill for the last 20 years or so, as if the god of visual novelty sort of pushed the pause button in 1990 or so. I'm not saying there haven't been brilliant things designed and created since 1990, but the overall change in the way things, objects, buildings, people look as a defining character of their era, it has not been changing as slowly as it has in the last 20 years for at least a century. In your minds, picture what things looked like, for instance. I think most of you were around in 1974 probably. Picture 1974 in your minds. The topography, the new architecture, the cars, the fashion, the bell-bottoms and giant collars and pantsuits. Now, it's totally and instantly recognizable as its era, and as entirely different from what came 20 years before, 1954. That looks nothing like 1974, and what 1994 looked like. And if you look at any 20-year period in the last century or so, it's the same. 54 versus 34, totally different. 34 versus 1914, totally different. But picture 1994 compared to now. The way we dress, the way we style our hair, the way new buildings and cars look, the movies, the music. Yeah, you can look closely and say, oh, no, the fender there in that car they didn't do that in 1994. But you have to look really closely. And I have run this experiment with people to tell me, okay, is this from 5 minutes ago or 20 years ago? And whether it's music or movies or cars, and as long as they don't recognize the particular model or film, it's a test that people do not often or easily pass. Now, is that a complaint, as I say? Not really. It's an observation that and it's kind of grumpy, and it's kind of curmudgeonly, and it's saying, why has this changed? What existed, this kind of accelerated sense of visual novelty that this museum certainly is a keeper of and an expression of? Why has that slowed down so much? But part of what I want to say, as to kick this off, is that complaining should not be an end in itself. We need to pick and choose worthy targets. Donald Trump comes to mind. Using the word impact as a verb comes to mind. Having to pay extra for Wi-Fi in an expensive Miami Beach hotel comes to mind today. But seriously, complaining is best when it has a point beyond venting and beyond the psychological reasons I spoke of earlier, when it becomes purposeful and social. The best reason to complain, and the most American reason, by the way, is not just to find other people who are bugged by the same things that bug you, but to gather around some interesting or important complaint, to look at it squarely together, to maybe form a team or an ad hoc community, to figure out how to mitigate or eliminate the thing that's bothering us. The wheel is squeaky. Let's figure out what kind of grease it needs and grease it. I guess the most famous proverb about complaint is the one about the weather. Everybody complains about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. The point of which is the pointlessness of certain kinds of complaint. But of course now it turns out that mankind is doing something about the weather, accidentally but profoundly through carbon emissions, and that now we're sort of obliged to do something about it by design. As I said earlier, America was born by means of this very cranky 1,300-word complaint, the Declaration. But what happened immediately thereafter? The war, of course. But then, 12 years after the Declaration of Independence, was the United States Constitution, which gets to this other theme of this weekend, which is the power of design. The Constitution was the first time in history that a government and a nation were designed from scratch, and then built, and then tweaked and redesigned and argued about and renovated and rebuilt continuously ever since. So here we are. That's at the fabulous Wolfsonian, where I've always wanted to come, and which I knew, never having been here, would become my new favorite museum. I can't quite say that because I'm on the board of the Cooper Hewitt, but it really is my favorite museum. It's a fantastic place, and one wonders, and this is what these 8 people are going to now spend the next 4 hours. No, these people are now going to address of how many of the objects here were really inspired by some artists or designers or clients' small or large dissatisfaction, or maybe once it was created, provoked dissatisfaction and complaint. Well, we will find that out now. This will be a lightning round, 3-minute presentations by 6 experts from this fantastic institution, as well as two special guests, the first of whom I want to introduce right now, Mr. Todd Oldham.
Thank you. Welcome tonight. Phone and clicker. All right. We'll make sure we stick to 3 minutes. Start. All right. Thank you so much for coming, and it's really a pleasure to be with you all. And in this place, I agree with Kurt completely. One of my favorite home away from homes. And having got to curate some shows during Art Basel a few years ago for the Wolfsonian, I got to spend many days in this fantastic permanent collection. What occurred to me after marveling at all of the unbelievable treasures around here is that many of them have quite a shadow on them. Now, maybe it was a shadow that came in advance of the object's existence or afterwards, but I sort of half-jokingly said to Cathy, well, you guys should do a show called The Big Bummer, because I've never seen so many things that are, right, or could be into being a real drag around here. So she very kindly asked me back after 4 years, and I spent a little less time in the bummer rooms, but it was very fun to sort of pull these things together with a sort of a psychological approach, and then once again to find how beautifully that they all actually went together. You'll see on the 5th floor, it's about 70 objects in the room. And how may I advance the slides, or will that be you? There we go. One of the first pieces you'll see, now I do recognize we're talking about some very heavy subject matter here, and I'm by no means trying to make light of the tragedies or the real horror that comes with them. But there's some great observations that can come from seeing their proximity. For instance, there's about a dozen HIV and AIDS posters that are from around the world. The Wolfsonian received a very large gift of many thousands of posters, and it occurred to me looking through them that I had never once considered what an HIV poster looked like in Istanbul. And when you started seeing them, this incredible cultural resonance started appearing. You started to see the way they approached it. Were they able to discuss it overtly, or were the stigmas taking? And then you could see that the locale, like the Swedish posters were gorgeous. You know, look at the one from Denmark with the shark there. It tells you everything, but in a very smart way. And then you see the center poster, which is African and focusing much more on the family. So while the posters are all marvels themselves, both of printing and design, some of them is pretty shocking. And if we think about it, it may be the only subject matter in our world where we have all addressed it through graphics as well as the reality of it. I can't mean, there's a few things that lead to it, but nothing that every single country has spoken about. So that made it an interesting document. You'll see lots of peculiar objects. One of the scariest I see was a complete surprise to find it was by Louis Comfort Tiffany. And it's the scariest door knocker I've ever seen in my life. The door knockers come directly out of the poor woman's eyes. I'm projecting it's a woman with a delicate nose and mouth, and you bang it on her tongue. This is from 1900, and I'm sure it instilled only nightmares from visitors to this home. There are many other, joyous nightmares like the Kill the Jap game for children made in 1948. Some gorgeous set of Hitler's silverware, so you'll be sure and want to check that out on the fifth floor. And I urge you to make sure that you see all the morsels and all the nooks and crannies of this really glorious, very special museum. And thank you for coming.
Good evening, I'm Silvia Barisione, one of the curators, and I would like to present one of our masterpieces, which was actually a bummer when it was presented in 1930 to the Irish government by the artist Harry Clarke. So the Irish government, the Irish Free State was proclaimed in 1922, and in 1926 the government commissioned Harry Clarke to create a Western glass for to donate to the League of Nations in Geneva for the newly built headquarters of the International Labour Office. The artist was a leading figure of the Romantic nationalism, went back to the Celtic revival, and which has had its roots in the 1880s, and so evoking the Irish tradition. He wanted to, the movement wanted to create a kind of Irish pride in the Irish people and create a new national identity. The problem was that the artist selected 15 contemporary artists, since writers, since literature was the main source for Celtic revival, and he was helped by Yeats, the famous Irish writer who just got in 1923 the Nobel Prize for Literature. So when he displayed in 1930 his stained glass, he created a big scandal in a way, because even if the government and the press recognized the stained glass as a masterpiece, the government didn't want to displease influential leaders, religious and political leaders, and especially the Catholic Church. So the president immediately wrote a letter to the artist saying that so these erotic scenes from Liam O'Flaherty. This is a scene representing Mr. Gilholy, with the main character looking just with a glass of whiskey and a cigar, just staring at this half-naked dancer, was considered in a way too provocative. And even this scene from the Magic Glasses by George Morris Fritz, showing the naked women that were just tempting the main character, was really considered too much. It was not the image that the Irish government wanted to give of the new nation, and for this reason the stained glass was rejected and never installed. And since we love bummers, we have it here at the Wolfsonian.